everyone. Hi, George. Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I've not had a chance yet to do two appearances in the same room 2 days in a row, but here I am. We had our investor day here yesterday, and now I'm back here.
It's the first time for everything.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like we've had so many great discussions so far about the uses of AI in both enterprise development, where we're developing there, creativity, and now what better way could we talk about another AI application, human connection and potentially finding romance. So excited to have you here for this conversation.
Thanks for having me. Excited as well.
Well, I'd love for you to just give, for this audience, I'm sure most people are familiar with Grindr, but a little bit of your backstory about how you got to Grindr and then kind of where you're seeing some of the bigger developments coming on the pipeline for you with AI and dating right now.
Yeah. So Grindr is the largest gay and bi network in the world. We have about 14 million people on Grindr on a monthly basis. We're in 190 countries and territories, so we're extremely global. Like literally, you can pinpoint 3 countries in the world where we don't operate. And Grindr's been around for 15 years. We turned 15 in March. It was one of the earliest iPhone apps in a traditional way, in the way they are today, and really kind of changed the landscape in that sense. Grindr's gone through weird ownership changes from the founder to the Chinese, and the Chinese to the large shareholders today. Massive underinvestment in the company during the Chinese ownership, which was really not great. We also are the only successful case of CFIUS forcing a divestiture from a Chinese company. So, a great case study for what is about to happen to TikTok. And it's not an if, it's a when, right? And so when the new large shareholders bought Grindr, they needed a new CEO, and so they recruited me to become the CEO, and I took over in the fall of 2022. I'm a founder by everything. I've built 3 companies from scratch, including an AI company in 2018. So before AI was a thing for everybody. Obviously,
you were early too.
Yeah, we were very early. So AI then was very different. In a weird way, what data actually matters much less now than it did back then, for what it's worth. When I considered taking this job, it was a big change for me because I wasn't going to be running my own company. I was running somebody else's company, even though obviously I still have a very founder mentality to everything I do here. Last 2 things just about Grindr is very small, even though it's so big. Like we did 260 million in revenue last year, growing. Our guidance as of yesterday is 25% growth for the year. We run a 40+% EBITDA margin business, and we have, I think, about 120. We had 125 people at the company as of March of this year. And I want to keep it very lean because lean companies are much better and scarcity has a lot of virtue. And so AI is really critical, not just to the products we build, but to how we're going to work. Because my hope is, by end of next year, for example, I got maybe 60 engineers and 30 synthetic engineers writing code.
Yeah, well, I was going to say also, too, kind of a good segue before we jump into all of your AI applications that you're working on right now. Do you consider Grindr, I mean, it's pitched often in this category with Match and Match Group and Bumble and these other dating apps that have been pretty public about their aspirations around AI products, potentially AI Wingman. Do you see Grindr strictly as a dating app? Like, how do you categorize it?
No, so that was a big theme of our presentation yesterday. Yes, obviously, casual dating, which is the thing that Grindr is amazing at and has always been, will always be amazing, right? If you kind of take sex out of gay culture, something's wrong and that won't work. And that's what drives a lot of the tie that people have to our product. But people use Grindr for so many other things, whether it's friendships, travel recommendations, discovery. 27% of our weekly active users are traveling any given week, which is like pretty incredible. It means like 1 out of 4 people using Grindr in a given week are not in their home location. So we do a lot in that regard because people use it to figure out what they should do in a given location. We think health and wellness is another big aspect of what people use Grindr for, and there's a lot more that we can do. So we tend to say we're more akin to a social network than we are a dating app, even though dating and casual dating is kind of primary and the core thing that's in the product.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, also I know some of your competitors' stock has been kind of faltering recently, while yours has been going up.
Well, I think stock is going to do what it's going to do, and over the long term doesn't matter. I think that we have 2 advantages. One is that we are severely undermonetized. Match per an analyst yesterday is at 20-25% pair penetration, we're at 7. Now that's gone up from 6 in a year and a half, which is good, but it's still far off from 20. And so we have a lot of room to do better. And then secondly, I think both Bumble and Match, unfortunately, have massively underinvested in product innovation. So the focus has been completely on like, how do I get people to pay more? And I think that's what's driving users to not be engaged. And then
Pay more for the same service?
yeah, exactly. And then secondly, like both of those products have a challenge because Hinge is doing great, right? Like Hinge is growing actually very rapidly, which is the only one of the big ones that is innovating in the straight world. And then secondly, like all these companies have a massive set of male users and actually much fewer female users. But if you listen to how they talk about the male users, they're like second-class citizens. And that does not actually make sense, right? You have this community of men who are striving to find long-term partners. How do you help them do that? Actually, is a huge product opportunity, which is being completely ignored by our straight peers. Yeah. But that's kind of their thing. You know, I got to do what I got to do.
That's not your business. Yeah, you're focusing on innovating within your community. So, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, kind of high level in both for the straight dating apps and for some dating apps about an AI Wingman feature, potentially agents.
I'm glad that people are using the term I coined.
That's your term. Yes, they've taken it from you. Yes, but an AI Wingman that could potentially, filter through matches or talk for you or date for you. And I'm curious to see, like in your experimentation with this feature, how do you see it working long term, and where are you in kind of implementation for this? Is this kind of far away, or?
No, it's not far away at all because we internally are using it already.
Oh, wow.
So we, look, I've been thinking about how AI will work at Grindr before I even took the job because it's been a big thing. And then my friend Manish Patel introduced me to a company called XHuman about a year and a half ago, which is it has its own model trained for romantic conversations. And so we obviously are going to train our own models as well, but I'm like, how do we get to market faster? And their model was very good because it's already trained for romantic conversations. And so we did a deal with them last year where we're actually using their model for the Wingman first.
Okay.
And it's quite good. And so now we're going to add Grindr training to the model as well for our kind of terminology and how our users behave. And the first product we're going to launch with it, because I think a lot of discussion about AI is kind of skips a step, which is there's a world that we're going to be in over here in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. But to get there, you don't just jump from here to over there. You need to like go through a bunch of steps.
Well, you also need an AI product that can first launch. Yeah.
Right, and like something that like in a minimal way lets people use it, and the users are going to tell us how they want to use it, right? I built a company called Taxi Magic, now known as Curb, which was like taxi booking service years before Uber existed.
I would say those who live in New York are familiar with Curb.
Yeah, everyone in New York knows Curb. And at that point, we're a B2B focused business first. And when the iPhone came out, everyone's like, no one's going to use an iPhone for business. And I'm like, I think you guys are crazy. But nevertheless, that was the view of most people, right? And then, of course, people started to use the iPhone for business. I think we need to go through those evolutions with AI as well. Like the users need to tell us how they want to use the product. So our focus has been how can we launch a minimal product for the user and get it in their hands and have them try to kind of tell us what they want. What we want the Wingman to do is things like suggestive text that you can use when you go into a conversation. Recommendation on, hey, if you like this profile, what are the other profiles that are similar to that you could potentially engage with? Someone's coming over for dinner or for something else, what kind of music should you play at home? Or you guys are going to coffee, here are locations that you might enjoy. Right? I think all of that will make the conversation that's happening on Grindr already a lot richer and better, and obviously that will all be done with user consent, meaning we won't do that for people who don't want that, but if you do want that, you can try it. That is not that far off. Our goal is to get that into a kind of beta test with a set of users in probably Q4.
Okay.
And so that's not that long time because we are already using it internally and it's working reasonably well. I think the next layer is going to be more advanced, which is now the AI actually looks at your chats and understands you through your chats a lot better rather than just your clicks. Because a lot of people say one thing in their profile, but actually want something else. And what they really want is in the chat conversations. Grindr users produced 121 billion chat messages last year.
121 billion?
Yeah, for 13.5 million MAU. So like, they're very active in conversations. And there's a lot of information that's very rich there. So if users give us permission, for us to really understand what they want and then connect that to other people who really want that is a huge opportunity. Dating is really limited by geography because every one of the companies, us included, is tied to a geography. But in the gay world, geography is very limiting. Even in New York, there's probably only maybe 100,000 people in the pool of what you'll be kind of looking in if you want to date long term. Because once you remove age and positions and things like that, the pool falls dramatically. So if we could break the geographic barrier by giving you extremely rich connections based on your behavior and your conversations outside of your immediate geography, you probably would find that quite interesting. You might not do that if it's just like based on where you went to school and a few things on your profile, but if it's a lot richer and transparent, like, hey, this is why we think these 5 people are good matches for you, I think people will find that interesting, especially in a world where our users are traveling one of 4 of our users are traveling every week. So I think that's a massive opportunity for transforming how we think about dating online, because that's something that no one's ever done yet.
Absolutely. That does also raise a whole host of other questions and concerns, though, if you're using internal chat data, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, with dating apps, also Grindr is known as sort of a safe space for gay, bisexual, transgender men to meet safely. Some of your users, I understand, are discreet. A good portion of them.
30% of our worldwide users are discreet.
What about 30%?
Yeah, and discreet can mean any number of things, right? Like it could mean like I need to have a totally private profile that doesn't have any pictures to, I'm out and everyone knows, but I don't feel comfortable being as open that I'm on Grindr because I live in a location that is, legally it's okay, but tolerance levels are not as high as they need to be.
Right, but then, of course, considering all those factors, I would assume data privacy is really, really important to your users.
Yes.
So I guess,
and to us, because it's actually necessary for the business to be successful.
Right, I was going to say, do you have procedures in place for, especially around AI implementation, to protect privacy? And how do you view kind of AI and privacy sometimes being in conflict with each other because you're using this data to learn to become smarter, but then people, are giving up a lot of data about what they like and how they like to date.
So we would never do anything with our data unless users give us permission to do it. That's just been at the core of Grindr from the beginning. There are a lot of stories out there in the ether about XYZ might have been happening, but totally actually misunderstand what we do. We are minimal in the information we ask people. So you can create a Grindr account with no photos, no verification of yourself. We depend on Apple and Google for your age verification, but beyond that, we don't force verification. We don't allow you to create an account on the web. You have to go through mobile, Apple and Google only. Again, all for the reasons of like limiting needs to ask people for more information, precisely because so many of our users are discreet. And we try really hard to ensure that people who are discreet are not second-class citizens in the app, because there's valid and legitimate reasons why they need to be discreet. That's a very different mentality than any of our straight peers and many of our gay peers as well, because we're so focused on privacy. We don't use data unless you give us permission to use data, and we will not offer you AI features unless you want those features to be available to you. So that's something that's at the core. We have an AI council internally that kind of looks at everything we do in order to make sure that we stay true to our kind of privacy-forward approach, because that's what our users want, number one, but it's also what we need as a business. Because if we ever violate users' privacy, the negative damage that would do to the company and the product is very hard to fathom, and so that will always be front and center for us. And to just add to that, like I grew up in the Soviet Union. I know what it's like to live in a country where you cannot be as openly gay as we can be here. And so personally for me, the privacy topic is really critical because I've lived through that for a long time.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. And then you mentioned earlier something I wanted to kind of circle back to. You talked about how Grindr obviously is looking more into facilitating long-term relationships and longer connections. How are you kind of executing on that? Like moving on from having, of course, casual interactions being a big part of the app, but this could be a growth area for you that some of your peers maybe have a little bit more established. So yeah, how are you working on that?
So our research shows that of our Grindr's users, those that are in long-term relationships, 4 in 10 of them have found their long-term partners on Grindr. And Grindr users don't leave Grindr when they're in long-term relationships most of the time, so it's not like it's a small sample, it's like actually a lot of people. What mattered to people 15 years ago is different from what matters to them today. We just celebrated 9 years post-gay marriage. It's a different world. People want to be in relationships in our community much earlier and have a much greater desire to be in a relationship than they did, say, 15 years ago. People use other apps as well. That's very common in the dating space. but they
Yeah, one
tell us.
customer could be using, a match product app.
Exactly,
Or,
yeah. And what our users tell us is like, I actually do start using, say, Tinder for long-term relationships, but I actually have more luck finding my partner on Grindr versus there because you have density and they don't. Right? They have the features, but Grindr has density. And then lastly, a lot of hookups lead to relationships. Our internal joke is, if a gay couple has 3 hookups and doesn't then go on a date, probably nothing will happen, versus a straight couple, if it doesn't go on 3 dates first, probably nothing's going to happen. So all that said, we still think that building a feature set to match people better for long-term relationships is a huge opportunity. And we are, what I've pushed the team on, and that's how we're going to do it, is like, don't think of the product that made sense in 2021 or 22 or 23, or the product that is out there today. Think of what it will look like in 3 years, and let's build that product. And I think that's how we need to approach the relationship product. We're going to initially launch, again, feature by feature within our existing kind of paid features, like we launch dating features. But then over time, I kind of envision a full suite of services that will be specific for dating. I think one of the things that will probably happen will be that I will have a synthetic, and you'll have a synthetic, and our synthetics will talk to each other, and then deliver to us that conversation of like, hey, okay, we think we're a good match, and here's why. And so whereas today, matching on Tinder or Bumble, you don't really know why you were matched with those people, this will actually be far richer and have a lot more information on why this makes sense or doesn't in a way that people will, I think, enjoy.
There's also, of course, the ever-growing market of dating simulators with AI, perhaps the AI partners demographic in kind of a chat place. I know it seems like a lot of interactions on character AI are romantic in nature. Is that something that you've been approaching with Grindr? Is that a space that you'd be interested in getting into at all?
Yeah, I mean, this got leaked in a story that we're building an AI companion.
There is a spoiler alert. There is a reason I'm asking you this.
So my policy on that has been not to comment about it because we've not publicly commented about it, but I mean, I also acknowledge that it's been leaked and we've not denied what's been out there. I think that the way I think about it is this, and bear with me because it's a little bit convoluted, but I think really important. Loneliness, which then leads to depression, which then leads to thoughts of suicide, is a massive issue in our community. I go to the Stanford LGBTQ clinic for my primary care. My practitioner didn't know I was the Grindr CEO until about a month ago, and when my last time I saw him, he's like, oh, and then he kind of gave me all the stuff. And one of the things he said was, in his panel of patients right now, in the last 30 days, 50% of the patients had suicidal thoughts at some point in 30 days. That's like extremely depressing and sad. And then we went through like, okay, what can Grindr do to address that? And it was he who pushed this, even though I've been thinking about this for a long time too, is actually chatbots can be really valuable in that sense, both in terms of addressing people's loneliness, because it does have an impact, but also identifying that someone is actually headed in a direction that is dangerous, and then connecting them with a live person who can help them. Right? That would be really valuable as well. So for me, when we think about a companion, that's the first thing I want to solve for is like, how do we ensure that people who are lonely, who might be depressed, and who might have challenges are getting the engagement that they should be getting to help them?
So having mechanisms to go beyond the chatbot and find real-world resources if it comes to that.
Exactly. That would already be like a huge value add, I think, to users. And then secondly, look, like the reality is people are clearly liking companionship with AI. When I first brought this up to some folks a year and a half ago, like, why would anyone ever do that? But now I think a lot of those people are coming back to me saying, oh, you kind of were right. And so, it would not make sense for us as a business to not be at least thinking about it. I'm not yet sure where we'll go with that. Like, Wingman makes sense to me, and we're going to launch that first. With this other stuff, we're going to learn a lot and then decide how we want to go. I'm a very user-centric product person, and so yes, I have founder intuition about stuff, but ultimately users need to tell me how they want to use a product, and we need to go through that exercise.
Makes sense, yeah. We are out of time. Well, thank you so much, George. It's a fascinating conversation and awesome to get to talk to you during Pride Month.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, it's awesome. It's going to be a fun weekend in Europe this weekend.
It is, yes. Thank you so much.